2022. We'll dive right into the agenda, and the first item is a call to order. Second item is approval of minutes from the July 20th, 2022 Police and Fire Commission meeting. We've got those meeting minutes in the packet that are posted on the city website. Any questions, thoughts, comments, motions?
I can make a motion to move that we approve the minutes from the July 20th, 2022 Police and Fire Commission meeting.
Second.
All right, a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. Let's move on to agenda item number 3, public appearances for non-agenda items. Doesn't look like we have any for today. Agenda item number 4, PFC workshop by the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. So every year, I believe it's every year, the League of Wisconsin Municipalities puts on a workshop where, at least in the past, they've brought attorneys in to do some of the training. And Brian, I know that you had been looking at it recently as a new member, and even for members who have been here for a while, I think there's a benefit to it. The league also has this handbook for Wisconsin Police and Fire Commissioners that I think we all got as part of our orientation to the commission. But it's a great service and opportunity coming up on November 4th. Do you know, Brian, is that in person this year, or is it still by video?
I believe it's via Zoom.
I think last year it was in person, because I was able to attend last year in person. I think it was.
Very nice.
So hopefully, I went in person, and it is fantastic. It's a great training. I think that everybody should try and attend if they can, but I like hearing that they have a Zoom option as well, so either.
Yeah, a great networking opportunity as well. I'm not aware of any networking groups for police and fire commissioners around the state, but we're all dealing with the same general issues, I suspect. So maybe it's a good opportunity to get that networking in as well. What? Any other thoughts or comments on agenda item number 4, League of Wisconsin Municipalities? All right, then Chief Morales, we'll turn it over to you for the report from the police department.
Well, we had a pretty detailed meeting last month, and we talked about our retirements, and that brought us down to 4 vacancies in July. We did have a summer process for hire. We did. Oh, I'm sorry. We did have a process during the summer. We were authorized to extend conditional offers, and we were able, out of the entire list, to get 2 in the police academy that started this last Monday. Those 2 individuals are, and can I give their names out now that they're in the academy and their information?
I don't know if we need them right
Okay.
now, so yeah,
Right.
maybe just avoid it for now.
Okay, so we have 2 that started the academy, so that gets us to. We are down 2 positions, so we have a total positions filled is 52 out of 54 sworn. Gives us 2 vacancies. 3 are currently in field training. 3 are in the law enforcement academy, and that gives us, for patrol positions unfilled, that leaves us with 8. We do have a lieutenant eligibility list that expires in February. And that's something new that was asked. So that is on here as well, that we have 1 position on the list for the lieutenant eligibility. We do have a possible expectation of 1 individual that's looking at retiring in the fall, although no documents have been presented. And we're looking for 2 additional retirees sometime in the late winter, anywhere between January through March. So what we have done since then is have an open process for recruitment and hiring. We do have a list that's generating from applications, and we will start to dive into that to see what we can come up with for the additional openings. The only issue is that there is no police academy opening as of this last Monday. I think the next opening class would be at the end of the year, sometime in December or January. So we are, as far as total orderings, for the month of July, 46. Average length of time is 3.14 hours. The number of orderings per current unfilled patrol positions is 5.7. And patrol staff availability, 78, 22% unavailable. And the significant events, as I mentioned, we had 2 retirements in the recent June and July, along with special assignments. And those are some of the assignments that, like the community resource officer and the follow-up acting detective officer. I looked at July 2021, and the numbers were not that far apart if you look at them in the reports. So it's pretty consistent with last year, and we were struggling with staffing as well last year. That's all I have for the staffing report.
Any questions or concerns or comments? One thing Chief noted is a new thing on our staffing summary. It's on page 6 in the packet, kind of the bottom left-hand side at the bottom. It says Lieutenant Eligibility List 1. One of the things that we had talked about with Sarah was adding the current pending eligibility lists to these staffing reports, just so we don't lose track of them. So we may have approved that eligibility list to extend for a year. It must have, I don't know, it might have been months ago, but back in February. So the intent of that is just so that we can better track our eligibility lists as they continue. So we'll do the same for the fire service as well. All right, sounds good. Any other questions for Chief Morales?
Can I just ask a question about that eligibility list? Does that mean we have an open lieutenant position we can hire if you choose to?
With that, we don't have an open lieutenant position. In fact, there's an announcement I want to make at the end that will help you better understand the purpose of keeping that position there. But even if the lieutenant position we have, let's just say one decides to leave the department or one retire or move to a different area within the city, we would have a person that we can fill that spot immediately.
Gotcha. Thank you.
That'd be the next person up.
All right, any other thoughts or questions? Great. All right, thanks, Chief Morales.
Thank you.
Chief Pulvermacher, we'll turn to you for a staffing report.
Yeah, staffing report. Basically, what I'm noticing here, and I'm going to apologize, the July report was intended to be posted to the agenda, and it wasn't. I will forward that to you. It's consistent with what you've seen over the past 6 months. That being, our call volume is continuing to go up. And the fact of the matter is we're seeing with the increased activity in the city, not only the development that we have within the city, but the fact that people are out and about more than they were a year or 2 years ago. We're seeing that activity actually directly correlated into emergency responses as well. So that is something that is worthy of taking note of, along with the fact that this is the time of year that we try to get out there and do our fire inspections because of the fact that the weather is cooperating. We take that into consideration with other training activities that we try to do while the weather is nice at the same time. But from a predictability standpoint, we're consistent with our operations in the way of inspection. We are also trying to speed that up because of the fact that our records management system is scheduled to be replaced at the end of this year. So we don't want to have ongoing inspections at the same time that we're switching over a records management system. We were able to promote the deputy chief that was previously approved by the commission. Rob Kunze started on the 8th of August. And he's already hit the ground running. It's a breath of fresh air in that position because of the fact that we've been able to effectively delegate certain things within the department that we typically hadn't been able to do with our current full-time staff. So improving and increasing the number of career command staff positions has made my job a little bit easier. It hasn't taken away what I've filled on the car completely, but it has reduced that number somewhat, and that's why I wish those numbers were in here for you, and I will report on that. The other thing that is interesting of note is the fact that of our paid-on-call training academy, we started out with 6 people. We're down to 2 right now. And that is consistent with what we've seen before. We typically have people drop out based on the training requirements, the time that's needed. With Rob in the new deputy chief position and me putting him in charge of training, we're reevaluating all of our training just to make sure that what we're doing is consistent with what needs to be done from a department that requires us to constantly evaluate recruitment. But at the same time, typically in the past, we've had 1 recruit academy a year, and if people either drop out of that academy, wash out of the academy, or whatever, it leaves us sort of with our hands tied until the following year. So we are looking at evaluating how we can make that a more effective process so we can take advantage of available recruits as they present. And then I think some of the other things I'm going to get into with my presentation because it sort of speaks to how the department has morphed over its existence and why you continue to hear me talk about things like staffing and where we're going within the foreseeable future within the city of Fitchburg. And I can also share with you some of the things that we're not just working on here within the city of Fitchburg, but statewide. As far as how we can effectively address things that are impacting our ability to fund a municipality. And that's not just specific to the fire department, but it absolutely impacts the fire department. So I'm keeping it within some degree of reality as far as how we can effectively contribute to the city. And also addressing the fact that we're not the only department. We understand that prioritizations have to happen, but then planning is needed to be able to address the things that we do moving into the future. So, anybody have any questions as far as staffing, the report that I put out, and the fact that I've already taken note that any existing lists, eligibility lists, will include that on that correspondence.
All right, any questions for the chief? Okay. Chief, before you get into your presentation, I will seek a motion to amend the agenda and revisit the public appearances for non-agenda items for an individual who is here. So I'll move to amend the agenda and go back to public appearances for non-agenda items.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
I'm not in a big hurry.
Oh, no, please. No, Mr. Marshall, we appreciate you stopping by. So Tom Marshall, stop by the chambers here and feel free to share your thoughts.
Yeah, I just wanted to stop by. I went to this event last week that was sponsored by the police department. What was it called? National Night Out. Oh, it was just a wonderful event, and I'm a school counselor from 37 years ago, for the last 37 years in Wisconsin Rapids. And I know how kids look at police officers and that kind of thing, the small kids, the big kids. And I just thought that you guys did a tremendous job. And it was a great thing for our community. Even the adults were having a good time, right? Sitting on a motorcycle, fingerprints and on the car and that kind of thing. It was a terrific job, and I just think it's the kind of thing I hope you do every year. It was well worth it. Trying to think of the fellow's name that put it together.
Logan, yes, Logan Brown.
Yeah, I talked to him for a while, and he said it was just a big job, but it's well worth it. And a lot of my friends that went there with their kids and everything just thought it was just tremendous. So I want to thank you very much for doing that. Am I talking to the right body for that?
You are, sir,
okay.
very much so, yeah.
You're the body with the money, right?
Well, it's the chiefs who are doing all the good work, so, yeah, really appreciate your
No,
thoughts.
that's all I have to say. It was just a tremendous thing, and I just want to keep it going there, our fair city. So
Great.
thank you so much.
Thank you for the kind words.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Marshall, how did you hear about the National Night Out?
The big sign,
Big sign, just walking by?
as you're coming to the park, there's a garden there, Rotary.
Yeah,
My wife is in charge of that.
okay.
And I help her, of course. And we're there all the time, weeding and that kind of stuff. And I saw that big sign. I couldn't figure out what it was. So that's how I learned about it, that great big sign. It was, I
That's-
called a couple of friends of mine. They all came, and we had a good time.
Well, that's
I even got a free
fantastic.
hot dog, which is nice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for putting that together.
Thank you for coming.
Well, and this is a good place to note, so there were, I don't know, hundreds of people at that event last week, and it was a lot of work that went into it. So you mentioned Officer Brown and the work that he did. There were a lot of others who were part of it, so I'm going to just quickly note the individuals who were part of it that I know of, and to the extent that I missed anyone, I apologize, and let me know, and we'll catch you next meeting. Our Lieutenants Heitman and Lieutenant Hartwick, Sergeant McCarthy, Detective Aguirre, Detective Wissink, Officer Biak, Officer Hinojos, Officer Guzman, Officer Brown, Officer Enke, Officer Stefanski, Officer Spangler, our civilian service employee, Suzuki, and our intern in the police, or the intern in the police department, intern Belson. So thank you, all of you, for all the work that you did in putting on what was just a great community event, where we got to highlight the work that the fire service and police service do. And thanks for stopping by to highlight it.
It made me very proud to be a resident of Fitchburg. The officers were so kind to the kids and to the adults too. It was wonderful. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you for that amendment. Just last check, any other questions for the chief about the staffing report? Okay. So one of the things that we've talked about as commissioners in the past is the desire to really fully understand the structure of both the police and the fire service. As COVID has changed, is maybe the right word, there are more opportunities for ride-alongs, for some of the citizens' academies and those types of activities. And we thought we'd start with the fire service. We didn't have a whole lot on the agenda today, so we thought we'd have Chief Pulvermacher just give us a broad overview of the fire service for us commissioners, for the public watching as well. So, Chief, we'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for this opportunity. It doesn't come often enough where people ask questions about the makeup of the fire department. This becomes a perfect opportunity to be able to share some of the history of the department, why we are the way that we are right now, why we may look a little bit different than other fire departments, why we offer the services that we do. And a lot of that really pertains to the way that we came about. We were actually established through the town board, the town of Fitchburg, in 1970. We didn't start responding until 1971. We were staffed by an all-volunteer fire department. And you have to take into consideration the type of municipality that Fitchburg was at the time. A lot of farming, very much a rural type setting. I would pause to even call it a suburb of Madison at the time because of the fact that we just had a lot of open area. But there was still a need to respond to the overall risk associated with fire. What it didn't necessarily address right away was the need for emergency medical response, which is something that was developed independent of the fire department. And that's not something you always see. Sometimes you see fire and EMS together. Matter of fact, there's a lot of departments out there that put the two together. That's a discussion for another time. I have my viewpoints on that based on my upbringing. I can tell you that we have a great paramedic service that serves the city of Fitchburg. Are there efficiencies that can exist between the two organizations? I believe there are, but as far as that's concerned, that is worthy of additional study, if you will, just to make sure that whatever we're doing is going to serve the purposes of the city in a way that's sustainable and something that we can do with some degree of financial responsibility. The one thing that I can say about the fire department is we're not a money-making entity. If one thing we do is we are an insurance policy for the city, an insurance policy that's needed for the city in order to address fire and rescue response. We know this. If there's problems in the city and somebody has an emergency, they're going to dial 911. And whether we have the training or not, we're going to respond. I see the fire department, and we see this in public safety to begin with. Police, fire, EMS, professional problem solvers, people who typically arrive on scene and try to bring that incident to resolution, whether they have the capabilities of doing it or whether they have the ability to bring in additional resources. So that sort of stems into what I have to say about the historical perspective. We established ourselves primarily as a fire department. But if you look at the way that emergency services has morphed over the past couple of decades, or I'll just go back to the 70s, right, when the fire department was initiated. Back in the 1970s, the fire service started evaluating the need for emergency medical services. Those of you that are familiar with Squad 51, Emergency, Johnny Gage, Roy DeSoto, it was brought to light that paramedicine could be introduced through the fire service. And a lot of fire departments started practicing paramedicine at the same time. So you can say that Hollywood influenced it. I can tell you it influenced my career just from a 5-year-old kid watching that program. But at the same time, it did shed light on the fact that as long as you have people available in a station providing one service, is it possible to branch out and provide additional services? And that's sort of how EMS sort of morphed in the fire service to the point where it is now, where you'll have paramedicine and the ability to address some of the initial needs of patient care and patient assessment. Then in the 1980s, we started seeing more and more develop in the way of hazmat. In the 1990s, we saw more and more in the way of tech rescue. 2000s, we started getting into things like weapons of mass destruction and the need to evaluate homeland security. And then that morphed into what we're doing right now between our collective departments in the way of the response to active assailant incidents. We're seeing that fire department cannot hold on to what it's always done without taking a look at what we're responsible for now. We can pat ourselves on the back for doing a good job of the things that we've delivered in the past, but we also have to seriously take a look at the way that our emergency environment is morphing and the way that we need to be able to address it. So that speaks to the overall vision of a fire department. And I use great pause when I talk about vision, because when some people hear vision, they hear me just asking for more, not completely comfortable with what I have with our department right now. I want more. And the way that I look at it is, if I don't look at the future needs of this department based on things like growth, our industry in the area, we're already behind our ability to effectively respond to those incidents and then train toward optimal emergency service delivery. So those are things that we try to do with a vision, is if not now, how do we plan for it, right? So there's time and time again where I make presentations to the Common Council where it's a no, not right now. But then if we still need that, if it's truly a need that's needed within the city to be able to address the things that we need for emergency response, based on what we're seeing, not only locally but nationally, the trends that have developed, we need to be able to predict what it looks like to be able to put that into a timeline and to plan appropriately for funding, training, and implementation. So I will start out by showing you a basic overview. This is the organizational chart as it existed in 1971 when the fire department originated. This is an all-volunteer staff. And at the time, you can see the fire chief, he was initially responsible for coming up with all of this, not only the equipment, the facilities, but also the personnel. And the way that the fire chief at the time set it up is with every piece of equipment that was in the station, it had a captain, it had a lieutenant, and firefighters that were assigned to it. So as you can see, there was a total of 12 officers, and by officers, it's different than a police officer. We considered our promoted ranks officers, so company officer, command staff officer, those types of things. So it's a term that not everybody completely understands all the time when I start talking about fire officers. So our fire officers are typically our supervisors or our first line company officers and above. So that helped address that. And as you can see, we had what effectively was about a 35 to 40 person department in 1971. Now, the things that I don't have, and this is one thing that I'm working on with some of our more senior staff, the people who have been around for a while, is we're trying to go back, and this is where records management is important. And the fact that the fire service in general is trying to address data collection and data delivery in a way that allows for trending and a predictable response. What I can't tell you right now is how many responses they went on. I know that was probably in the area of 100, 200 calls for a year, so it wasn't a lot, but it was enough, and the reason why they were established is because there was a fire in the town of Fitchburg that wasn't controlled, and they were waiting for resources from the town of Madison, from Oregon, from those surrounding municipalities who ultimately came in to serve this city. But they waited, and the longer you wait for a fire response, the more likely you are to have a total loss. So the fire department was formed. If we look a little bit further into the future, this gives you a little bit of an idea of how the department has morphed. So initially we started out with all volunteer, and then what had to happen, because of the fact that we were receiving more and more calls, there was development within the city, and the city, it became a city in the 80s. So we started to see development in a way that impacted emergency service delivery. And some of our volunteers couldn't respond during the day, so we started to have what we called live-in firefighters, which morphed into our intern program. So it allowed us to have people on staff that were able to respond, at least get a vehicle out the door until others were able to respond in from the farmer's field, from their jobs, whatever. And because of the fact that the call volume was not significant, it wasn't that much of an impact on those firefighters. They could come in every once in a while. Their bosses might have been a little bit more lenient with their ability to respond because it really didn't impact them all that often. You also have to take a look at the fact that back in the 70s and the 80s, even in the 90s to some extent, the nuclear family was different. The way that people went to their jobs and parents stayed at home was something that allowed for a little bit more flexibility with one parent over the other. Typically, it was the male of the household that was going to work and then maybe staffed a fire department vehicle or came in on a response. But we started to see the fact that in order to address things like standard of living and things around the expenses of a family that both parents started to work. Now, both parents were equally responsible for the care of their children, and responding into the fire department isn't so much the priority when you have kids at home. The other thing that we started to see is as incidents started to increase and more incidents happen after midnight, you can probably just internalize this a little bit. You may be able to absorb a 3 o'clock in the morning call and then go into work the next day a couple of times, maybe a month. But when that becomes more and more regular, and then you have to go into work the next day after responding into the fire department at 3 o'clock in the morning, then again at 5 o'clock in the morning, that becomes a burden. And then at some point, if it's consistent, it impacts your well-being, your livelihood. So what we see is we see people prioritizing away from the fire department. This is one aspect that we started to see with some of the studies that we did, and that's what I have up here right now with the 2006 study. They started to identify the fact that we needed to introduce more career staff into the fire department. We needed to have effective supervision across the board. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is the fact that we had two separate studies that acknowledged the same results. One study was an internal study conducted by our city administrator at the time and the Public Safety Human Services chairperson. They basically went around, took a look at some of our comparables, and addressed the fact that we need effective command leadership, we need first-line leadership, and we ultimately need to start building up our career staff. That was reinforced when a municipal organization known as the Public Management Partners Consultant Group came in and said the very same thing. So what you are seeing on the screen isn't something that I came up with. This is actually part of the report. I just did a screenshot of the report to say this is what they're looking for. So if we look at that, you can see how many officers we have. We have, in this situation, we have 7 command staff officers and 9 lieutenants. So that's 16 officers. And you'll see where that plays in a little bit and why I bring this up, because the fact that multiple studies have pointed to the fact that leadership is something that we need to consider, and addressing our career staff is another one. So then we move into 2006 through 2010, and you can see how we're starting to bring on more and more career people. Now, POX, that stands for paid on call, paid on premises. All right, so instead of putting POC, POP, it's just POX. So it addresses our part-time staff. So in 2006, 2010, the fire chief's position was actually a part-time position. We had a deputy chief that assumed the career role, was here Monday through Friday, basically, and ultimately acted on the chief's behalf during the day while the chief was at his full-time job. We supplemented our staff with a good number of paid-on-call employees. So our staff has the ability to have upwards to 90 people on staff. Right now, if we just go back to the staffing report that I presented to you earlier, right now we have 55. We keep our career ranks full. We have 16 career people right now. Our paid-on-call, paid-on-premises ranks are the ones that we are having a tough time keeping full. We can bring people in, we train them, they get the education and the experience that they need to become good firefighters to the point where they can do it for a living, and they do, but just not with us because we don't have the available positions. So I say this jokingly, but we are a AAA farm team for a good number of career fire departments out there. And I use that to our advantage. I mean, there's some value to bringing people in and being able to train the fire service, but it is somewhat humbling when that time and that effort that you put into a firefighter goes someplace else and somebody else reaps those rewards. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but just on the paid on call, paid on premises, what does that role look like? Like, what's a day, a usual day in the life of a paid-on-call, paid-on-premises firefighter?
So where paid-on-call came into place is those typically people who lived in the city, carried a pager, and came in for major responses. Paid-on-premises is somebody that comes in at the beginning of the shift and will reside in the station until the end of their shift. We have the possibility of filling a 10, a 14, or a 24-hour shift. And so 1 month before, our administrative services manager will actually fill out the staffing for the next month. And so we know who's going to work. And where that's beneficial, and I'm happy that we have that program, but it allows us to staff the initial response. We're not waiting for people to come in. You know, years ago when I was a volunteer, I had a red light on my dashboard. You know, I got to go to the fire station and run in and then hop on a vehicle and leave. But that's all contributing to increased response times. And with a city that's our size, you can't effectively provide response when you're waiting for people to come into the fire station. So by staffing those seats, we're able to staff the initial response, and it does positively impact our response times.
Are there only paid-on-call firefighters in the city right now?
No, we have paid on premises mostly now because we don't have a good number of firefighters that live in the city. They come from outside the city.
Chief, and can you kind of follow up on the response times, how important that is? I think that's important for everyone to know. What is your goal for response times to the citizens?
Yeah, so what we do is we don't make up our own numbers. We use basically what the National Fire Protection Agency uses through 1710, which is their response standard, which suggests that we need to be on scene in most places in less than, I believe it's 8 minutes. But if we even look at things like emergency medical response, we want to be on scene within like 4. I mean, if we're seriously talking about those things that need immediate intervention, then we need to be there quicker. And that's one value that the fire department brings to the table that I don't think a lot of people see, because every time we talk about emergency medical response, we talk about the ambulance. The ambulance might be out of the city. It might be at a hospital, and we don't have hospitals in the city of Fitchburg, so they have to transport all of the patients from the city of Fitchburg to the city of Madison or surrounding communities. So that means that we don't necessarily have an ambulance in district, but we still have a fire truck in district, and our fire trucks are staffed with emergency medical technicians. We do have some paramedics that are able to operate at the emergency medical technician level until Fitch-Rona arrives on scene, especially if they're affiliated, then they can hop up to the advanced level provider. But what we're able to do by staying in district is we're able to provide that initial response, that initial patient care, and initial intervention. So you talk about things that need initial intervention, and I'm just speaking from I'm still a paramedic, right? I come from that background. I enjoy EMS. I've seen some of the best effects of emergency service through emergency medical care. It's truly humbling to know that you can make a difference that way. So I enjoy EMS, and I speak to emergency medical services from that part of my service over the years. So having firefighters that are trained in emergency medical service allows us to get on scene, do the initial evaluation, identify immediate patient needs, and provide those interventions. As firefighters, we are able to do things like Narcan. We are able to do CPR and shocking. We are able to provide epinephrine. So all those things, and if somebody is choking, the things that need immediate intervention, we are able to do. We can expand upon that if we then expand upon our overall ability to provide care at the advanced level. But that comes with an agreement between the emergency medical service that provides service to the city of Fitchburg. So we're working on those things, and we do work hand in hand. Another thing that, this is a great opportunity to share this as well. I'm going off a script a little bit. So you can see that a lot of these things have a tendency of just rolling right off the top of my head based on our experience. But there's a lot of people that ask about why we send a fire engine with an ambulance when they asked for an ambulance, right? And if you think about it, think about all the things that an ambulance has to do, or the paramedics need to do, and the equipment that they need to bring in. Well, first of all, 2 people bringing in all that equipment is one thing. You can probably imagine that not everybody in the state of Wisconsin is 110 pounds. Some of our clientele come in a little bit larger than that and require lifting assistance. You can't expect 2 people to do that. And the other thing that I share with people is I try to put it into another timeline. If you go into a hospital emergency room, that's a controlled environment, it's well lit, they know where all their stuff is, they're familiar with the area around them. You go in there and you say that you have chest pain, you're going to be surrounded by about 6 to 10 people, depending, right? Depending on how significant you're presenting. But you're going to have at least a nurse right next to you right off the bat, maybe a medical tech. You're going to have a doctor that comes in and talks to you. You're going to maybe have a pharmacist that's already mixing the drugs for them to do their job. You're going to have anywhere from 4 to 6 people initially on a critical patient, and that's in a controlled environment. So now we go to an environment that we don't necessarily see every day. It's not our environment, it's the patient's environment. And we have to go in and we got to bring all of our stuff in and then bring all of our stuff out, hopefully get the patient loaded and to the hospital within a realistic amount of time so that we're not spending too much time on scene. So that takes people. The benefit of having a fire truck there is the fact that you have 4 people on that fire truck that can assist, that are still in service for all intents and purposes for the next call. So if something else comes in and it presents and we're still in district, we're going to go to that next call. We don't necessarily take ourselves out of service, but we're able to assist the ambulance crew, get them back on the road and to the hospital, and it allows us to then put ourselves in a position where we're still in district and available for that next response, whether it's EMS or fire. And that's why it's important to staff those vehicles for the initial response. It's important to have those paid on premises and those career staff folks in the fire station 24 hours a day. And that's what we're sort of moving toward, right? I mean, the fact is that we know that the community is growing. We know that call volume is going up. We know that our exposure to a number of different things is also increasing, things that we haven't necessarily seen in the past. You can talk about natural disasters or man-made disasters. We're seeing them all, and we're responding hand in hand with others within public safety. The idea is we need to know how we can effectively position people so that we can address the overall needs of the community as it grows. Here's the shocking point, and this is one thing that we just met at the Capitol, which is why I'm in the tie. I don't generally come in the tie, right? I went to the Capitol this afternoon, and we were talking about things like shared revenue. We were talking about things like levy limits. We were talking about things like expenditure restraint. Because in order for the city of Fitchburg to maintain its status quo, we have to have net new construction of at least 4%. At least 4%. We need to grow in order to maintain status quo. So a lot of that has to do, and I'm taking politics out of this. We're telling everybody. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. We're telling everybody this shared expenditure program, which is not even called that anymore, is not working the way that it was intended. So the state's receiving revenues from a taxing standpoint, but not sharing those revenues across the board to the local municipality. It's local municipalities that are suffering. And the state right now has a revenue, has a surplus. So there's discussions that we need to have, and I'm sure it goes deeper than what I can provide right here, but it's worth having that conversation because in order for us to effectively staff our stations, we need to do things like referendums and things that allow us to work beyond the levy limit. And it still has an impact on taxes then when the state is seeing this additional revenue. It's stuff that we need to sit down at the table and have a discussion about both locally and through the state and through our various organizations. These are the things that I never thought as a firefighter that I would have to discuss. And I'm becoming a much better politician than I ever wanted to be. So I apologize for stepping on the soapbox, but it is impacting our ability to fund our respective departments. Police department can speak to the same. Department of Public Works can speak to the same.
So, Chief, just going back to the structure of the service, we have 3 stations in the city.
Yep. Thanks for bringing it back.
Oh, no. But tying back to staffing, right now, how many people are at those stations right now? Total, head count.
Yep. So we staff, our maximum and minimum staffing is 9 people. So there's 4 at Station 2, there's 4 at Station 3, and then we have a command staff level officer, an officer in charge that's able to oversee the entire city. We staff our operations out of Station 2 and Station 3. Our administration is staffed out of Station 1. The reason why we did that is because of the fact that when we were building Station number 3, we were supposed to move our administration over there. And based on the topography of the lot, they were telling us in a change order that we were going to have to add a second story on that building, which was going to include our construction costs by another $1 million. We did an appraisal of the existing Fire Station 1, and the appraisal came back very low to the point where the city wasn't going to sell it. And they were going to keep the property and just hold on to it in the event that we need it in the future. But when you hold on to a property, you still have to heat it. You still have to keep utilities going. So my question was, do we need to relocate administration, or can we find a way to make the existing station work and just manage our operations out of Station 3. It also provided us a central fire station. So if we are going to bring both stations together to do training, we're not on one side of the city or the other. We're in the center of the city. We also found a tenant. So Safe Kids, UW Health, is the tenant on half of that building. And basically they provide to us, it's a decent, it's a good value for them, but it's also a good value for us because they provide services that we would likely have to provide anyway. But for the tune of about $18,000 a year, the cost of what it costs us for utilities in the entire building, we're receiving rent. So I don't want to say it's a net zero. I'm sure there's costs associated with us being there, but we do offset those costs by having a tenant available.
There are trucks at Station 1, though, right?
Yep, so we have a backup fire engine. We have our command post at Fire Station 1. And what we're able to do, let's say we know we have got a blizzard coming in, and everything's predicting that we're going to be snowed in the next day. We can upstaff a station and have a third company available, knowing that getting either people in from off-duty or getting other municipal departments, mutual aid departments in to supplement our response is going to be difficult because the blizzard doesn't happen just for one community, it happens for everybody. So we know that that's going to impact our overall ability to staff an emergency, so we might upstaff, and we can do that at Fire Station 1 by upstaffing that backup rig. By having that backup rig, we also have the ability to ship that to either station in the event that we have mechanical difficulties that require an engine to be taken out of service. And we can also use it for training. So while they're in the center of the city, they don't have to pull equipment off of an existing in-service unit that we can maintain and basically they're available for response. So,
and at any given time, we have 3 fire engines as a city?
We have 3, and that's down from what was 4. We've been one thing that I've attempted to do with the department is take a critical look at the resources that we have. Are we using them to the level that we thought we were going to be using them? And if we're not, do we need to keep them? So we actually in 2017 put a brand new aerial in service. Our previous aerial did not have a pump on it. This one does. So now we have what, for all intents and purposes, could be a reserve fire engine if we needed it to be. So do we need a 4th engine? No. We reduced that So what that does, especially at the cost of fire engines nowadays, and what was $600,000 last year is likely to be $800,000 in the next year or two. That's $80,000 a year that we're saving right off the bat by minimizing our fleet. And those are things that we're taking a look at. Now, if we get more stations, would we need to get more equipment? Yes, but we'll address that when that need presents. And hopefully at that point, you'd have more of an income stream from a tax base that you could support it.
And back to the stations and staffing. So there's 4 people at Station 2 and Station 3, and there's 1 lieutenant at each of those stations?
No. There's, right now, what's happened is we used to have 3 career lieutenants and 6, actually it was 9, then it was 6. When I started out, it was 6 paid-on-call, paid-on-premises lieutenants. Typically, a lieutenant is first-line leader, company officer. You don't want to put somebody in that position that only has 2 years, right? Our median mode, the number of years of service for our firefighters is 2, 3, and 4. So most of our firefighters are staying about 2 years, but we do know that on average they stay about 3 to 4.
That average is all firefighters, paid on call, paid on premises, and career.
No, that's paid on call, paid on premises. Our career folks, they stay for a career, so those folks will stay for 20 years. And because we're able to pay them and they're able to support their families.
So the 4 that are in each of those stations, 2 and 3, are those all paid on call, paid on premises?
Nope. So we have 2 people per shift, per station, that are assigned to the shift. Of those, 1 can take off during any given day for vacation or holidays or whatever. So we always have a career firefighter that's at one of our stations. Good days, we have 2 career firefighters there, and the remaining positions are offset by our paid-on-call, paid-on-premises, unless they're not filled, right? So if we just cannot fill those positions, then what happens is the mandates that we report on. And I don't mandate our paid-on-call, paid-on-premises, because if I mandate our part-time folks, and it takes away from their ability to fulfill their functions in their normal jobs, they're not going to stay with us. So from a retainability standpoint, I can't mandate our part-time employees. I can, however, mandate our career staff, and that's typically what happens in that regard. So yes, it's a cross. And I will say this, I came from an all-career department. I should say that my experience started as a volunteer. I was a military firefighter, and then I was a career firefighter in an all-career department. When I came to Fitchburg on the combination side, what it did is it brought me back to some of my roots in the fire service. And one thing you can say about the paid-on-call, paid-on-premises folks is they're all in it for the right reasons. They're all there, neighbor helping neighbor, those types of things. They got the soul that's needed in order to provide service to the community. And I'm not saying that our career folks don't have that, but our career folks are the backbone. They're the structure. They're the ones that I rely on to get the day-to-day done because of the fact that those are the consistent force. Those firefighters are the consistent force that we have to be able to accomplish those things. So it's worth saying that I never really want to see our paid-on-call, paid-on-premises go completely away. I love the fact that we're a combination department, but I also have to be realistic in our ability to staff those positions and recruit people who are willing to offset their other priorities in their life. The other thing that we've seen from just a national trend standpoint is the fact that a good number of people will spend a lot of time at their jobs. Could be anywhere from 10, 12, 14 hours a day at their jobs. One of the last things they want to do is then come home and go staff a fire truck. Some will, and some do. I'm not going to take away from that. But if I'm realistic in our approach, the next generation hasn't been that accommodating for some very good reasons. And I don't want to take away from the fact that I don't see the value in maintaining an interactive family life and one that prioritizes family over anything else. But there is something to be said about the people who do make it their life's mission to come in and staff a fire truck. I will say nothing against Chief Morales or the police department. I will say this. The fire department has been its worst enemy in this regard. We have notorious, I wish Benjamin Franklin, who established the first volunteer fire department, I wish he was a cop. Because the volunteer fire service has typically been the fire service that has protected America. And we're not keeping up with what's needed, not at the rate that growth has happened. You look around at law enforcement agencies and tell me how many volunteer law enforcement agencies you see. You'll have some part-time cops. I'm not saying there aren't volunteers, but if you look at the great majority of law enforcement, it's going to be a career staff position. And so those are things that I think the city of Fitchburg isn't going to solve, but we absolutely have to contribute to, is the overall plan to get out of the reliance on volunteer and paid-on-call staff and address a career-based fire department that has the ability to be supplemented by a paid-on-call, paid-on-premises staff.
Do we have minimum and maximum requirements for paid-on-call, paid-on-premises?
We do.
Hour-wise? What are those?
So they need to staff at least 2 shifts a month, which amounts to anywhere from 20 to 24 hours a month, but many put in more than that. And then that allows us to distribute the overall workload. The more paid-on-call, paid-on-premises folks that we have available in the station, the lighter the load. The less we have, the more reliant we are on that and then mandates. So, and another thing that we also require is minimum training requirements. We can't just bring anybody in off the street. So even when we want to do things from just a recruitment initiative to be able to reflect our community, we can't just bring anybody in. So we have established certain initiatives to be able to distribute education, get that out there so that when somebody comes into the fire department and expresses interest in becoming one of our members, they already have the talent that they need. Now it's a matter of exercising things like experience. So those are things that we're trying to get in front of as well, but those typically are not paid positions. Those are sponsorships that we provide that are difficult to participate in if you have 2 or 3 jobs, right? So things that we absolutely have to address from a recruitment standpoint is how are we able to address the overall talent perspective. If we were the city of Milwaukee or the city of Madison, we could provide our own training academy because we had the ability to certify our own firefighters. But because of the fact that we're a smaller municipality and a smaller fire department, we rely on the VOTEC system, the Wisconsin College Technical System, to provide those certifications, which means we have to send them to a place like Madison College or Gateway or Milwaukee Area Tech or Kettle Moraine. I mean, those are places that they have to go before they're even able to go into a fire. They need firefighter 1 before they do any of it. And so there's certain things that we require before they even apply.
These questions may have knocked you off your and you may have this later on, but we've had a couple times in front of the commission requests to start the intern process and some other kind of positions. So where do those all fall in the current structure?
So in the current structure, they actually fall, you can see right next to the Deputy Chief Career Operations, I have 6 fire service interns. They're assigned to a shift. So we have 3 shifts, 2 stations, so ultimately 6 different crews. So each one of those fire interns is assigned to one of those crews. 3 are stationed at Station 2, 3 are stationed at Station 3, and they live there. So the facility that they reside out of is like a college dorm. During the day, they go to their college classes at Madison College. During the evening, if they're assigned to that shift, they'll then staff the engine. So they're put into the fold, and typically it's during the summer months when we first receive them. Our first-year interns, we just hired 3 of them. It took them pretty much the entirety of the summer to get through their minimum skills to the point where they could be counted as staffing. And now all 3 of those interns are counted as staffing.
And you've had the intern program for a long time. I mean,
Fitchburg was
it's
one of-
always been very reputable and one of the first.
Yeah,
I think,
Fitchburg
around.
was one of the first. It actually started in the 70s. Yeah, one of our first fire chiefs was an intern and Chief Grossen, who's our one of our current deputy chiefs, he was an intern. So there's value in being able to provide that level of education and exposure to the point where they have the ability to carry out the functions of a firefighter.
Is there a wait list for applicants for interns? I know there used to be.
Typically, we open it up. We actually push that up. Since I've been here, we used to do it right around February, March. We push that up to January to get in front of candidates, to recruit actively at high schools, and to get them into the process sooner than later, and to be able to walk them through the Madison College process so that they are registered as part of that program.
Is that still as desirable as our full-time career positions, the internship program?
About as desirable. We don't necessarily have a lot of applicants for the intern program because of the fact that we're asking them to start applying when they're still seniors in high school. So trying to get in front of them requires us to work through the schools, guidance counselors, to some extent, parents and family.
Do you have a percentage of your interns that have, I would love to see a percentage of interns that have either stayed in Fitchburg and then gone to other career departments?
I can't tell you who's stayed in the city of Fitchburg. I mean, it's going to be a fraction of what we actually have, but we have a 95% placement rating in the profession for our interns.
That's huge. That's fantastic.
All 3 of our second years that graduated out of the program this last year have positions, one with the city of Madison, one with Green Bay, and one with, I want to say Cleveland. It's not. I think it's like Toledo, Ohio.
But not Fitchburg.
We did hire one of our interns.
Yeah.
And actually, since I've been on, we have hired 2 of our interns.
Is it a fair statement to say, though, if you had more career positions, you could potentially keep?
Oh, I can tell you right now, it would either be people who are on our paid-on-call, paid-on-premises staff, or our interns, absolutely. If I had more positions, I'd have the ability to provide those firefighters with opportunity.
Yeah, so it would seem, as you talk about your retention opportunities, there's a correlation with, I think, needing more career positions for on-call and unpaid and interns, right?
Yep.
Retention of all of those 3 groups.
All of it.
Yeah.
Because I think staffing is very important. Obviously, we're trying to recruit more staff, but being able to respond in a timely fashion is what the citizens, I think that's a big push that we should make sure that we're sharing with what that response time is.
Yep. The other thing that I want to point out with this is how we're responding today. And remember, I showed you a couple of organizational charts that identified the number of fire company officers, command staff officers that were recommended, upwards to the tune of 16. Current day, we're working with 8 officers. That's the lowest that we've ever been, and we've got a community that continues to grow. and 3 of our lieutenant positions, and I need to note this. This is where there's additional confusion because in the law enforcement ranks, lieutenant is typically a command staff officer. In the fire department ranks, a lieutenant is the equivalent of a sergeant on the police side. So it's the first line officer, the company officer. So when I started, I was told that we had 3 additional career lieutenants that were available, and because this is probably one of the most influential positions on the department. This is the person that makes the day-to-day go. This is the person that makes sure that they do the jobs that they're supposed to, establishes the rapport that's in the station, and also sets the tone for camaraderie and just about everything. Morale is something that is tangible, good and bad, with a good or bad company officer. So when I came in, I was reluctant to just promote people for the sake of an open position. I asked if I could hold off on the promotion as we adjusted the organizational chart to be able to accommodate the additional positions, but then giving me a better chance to make observations necessary for an appropriate promotion.
Because you're saying it was just a time on the job position before you had came in?
No,
Is that-
no, it
was
wasn't.
still attested.
But I didn't necessarily have the wherewithal. I had a lot of opinion about who should be on and who shouldn't be in that position, and it was discussed at the command staff level that we give it some time so that I can make some observations. Because we're talking 3, and it'd be different if I was a larger department, but with a career staff of, at the time it was 12, you can highly impact a department negatively if you make the wrong promotion. So I asked for a year. And then in that year, once we started doing the process, it was pulled off because they said it wasn't funded to the level that it needed to be. And that happened when they established the positions.
So I didn't follow that. So what was pulled off then because there wasn't funding?
So they stopped the lieutenant's process. I had already had it approved through the Police and Fire Commission. We had started the applications. We were actually starting to do the testing, and we were told to pause because the budget, the municipal budget, wasn't supporting the promotions.
What year was that?
2018.
Okay.
So what you have on the screen there, the red boxes are lieutenants for each of the 3 shifts that were paid on call. Those were unfilled in 2016 and 2017. You came on board, you planned to fill them, but then the city budget was otherwise, and you were told you don't have that headcount authority anymore.
Well, not so much the headcount authority as the funding.
Okay. So when we look at our staffing report each week or each month, authorized headcount is the first, and this is on page 9 of our current packet. Authorized headcount is the current column, the first column. There are 2 chiefs, that's you and a deputy.
Yep.
There are 3 lieutenants, and those are the 3 lieutenants listed there, the 3 career staff at each station, or 2 at Station 2 and 1 at Station 3. Mm-hmm. And I can't read what's in those white boxes up there. Does that say lieutenant for each? There is a second lieutenant for each shift?
So in the white boxes, those are all lieutenants. So there's supposed to be 6 career lieutenants because those are the firefighters that I am able to maintain on staff the longest. With what I had initially, when I had 6 paid on call, paid on premises lieutenants, I would be looking at promoting people with 2 years on the job, which is not realistic from a management standpoint.
Okay.
So we basically reversed it. Instead of having 3 lieutenants on the career side, we put 6 on the career side and then 3 on the paid on premises side, figuring that if those go unfilled, we can fill those as needed, but the career would provide the consistency. And so, and still very much moving toward that, and just about all emergency services will tell you that first line leadership is crucial. Supervision is crucial. It's our ability to carry out the functions day to day, and that's why I wanted to have a lieutenant at each station. And this isn't stuff that I made up. If you go back to the studies, this is the last study that we had from the Ethical Leaders in Action. They're asking for the same thing. They're asking for appropriate command staff and company officer leadership. So, and that's 18 fire officers that they were looking for through the study. This is not me saying it. This is a third-party organization. And so when I bring up the lieutenant stuff, and I'll continue to do so, I mean, my job is not necessarily to pound my fist on the table, but more or less educate. There's a reason why I'm asking for it, and it's because of the fact that I see the value in having somebody that can make sure that things are getting done at the station and is held accountable for it. Right now, if I have a firefighter acting in that position, one can make the case that they are not accountable to the supervisory piece based on what their job description is. So I'm trying to get it to the point where it is part of their job description. They are responsible and accountable for making sure that that stuff happens. And quite frankly, even beyond discipline, it's an ownership piece. People will own their department when they feel like they're able to contribute and make decisions within its organization. So those are things that I see of great value. It also gives this department the ability for succession planning. Somebody who eventually will be in my seat because of the fact that they've experienced the fire department at all of its levels. And are able to move on to the next level. So from lieutenant, it would be division chief or deputy chief. So those are things that play into the overall value of addressing our staffing, and sort of gives you an idea of why we are making the pitch for continuing to rebalance the scale from career and paid on call so that eventually we do have more paid on, or more career firefighters than we do paid on premises. Eventually, I think we should realistically be looking at a 75-25% split within the next 10 years, where 75% of our staff is career, 25% makes up the paid on call, paid on premises. Right now, 71% makes up our paid on call, paid on premises, and 29% makes up our career staff. So, and selfishly, the other reason why I bring this up is I don't want somebody to come back in the future and say, you never told me, you know? And I don't want to go up in front of somebody and say, I told you so. But for all intents and purposes, what I'm trying to do is just responsibly act in the best interest of the city, of the fire department, and its firefighters, to be able to provide service in a growing community that requires additional staff, and to do it in a way that reflects things that are needed not only at the local level, but at the state level in order to address our ability to fund. So those are some of the things that give you some perspective to some of the things that we're working on currently and need to work on well into the future.
Chief, the numbers, the percentages you just gave us, it sounds like you're almost like, flipping the model, the 75-25 career. Have you thought about, and it sounds like a big part of your challenge obviously is budgeting, or budget, the funds for to make such a transformation in the department. Have you thought about it going out again for another study that would actually kind of you've made the case, right, in the prior studies, but actually more focus on what it would take from a financial perspective to transform your department the other way?
Yep, so I think there's a couple of different things. We recently participated in a study in 2018. It was a fire and EMS service delivery model study that took a look at things like staffing, took a look at how we were delivering our service right now. It wasn't received very well. It was a political piece. There was a lot of people personally affected by a change in organization. It was inappropriately named the Chief Pulvermacher study because I had been fairly new in my position. I did advocate for it because there's a lot that I wanted to learn about the department, and quite frankly, I wanted a third-party opinion as far as where we needed to go, so that it wasn't just me speaking from the bias of a fire chief and somebody that's been affiliated with fire-based EMS. But it did take on a negative connotation. It got to the point where all of the deliverables were not necessarily received. So there have been studies that have taken place. I would love to see another study, and I know that the city is looking at doing a staffing study with its ARPA funds, and that would be a municipal staffing study that not only addresses the fire department, but all city departments, so that as we go to fund these positions, how can we responsibly do that with the way that the city is receiving its funds? And most of our funds are received by tax base, so.
Chief, the impending dissolution of the town of Madison happens in about 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
Fitchburg is set to inherit territory from that town of Madison. All of the information you presented today, I presume, has nothing to do with picking up this extra area of responsibility?
Some of the extra area was already addressed with where we placed Station 3 on Sain and McCoy. So some of the infrastructure that we have and where we've placed it was done with the town of Madison in mind. The additional call volume is going to increase our responses. It's going to increase the workload. Eventually, that doesn't do much in the way of staffing the fire station, but it should impact our career versus paid on premises counts. Just because of the fact that with increased activity comes what I had talked about earlier, and that's, how much is too much for somebody who's already got other things on their plate. So it's stuff that we've taken into consideration. The city of Madison didn't necessarily do us any favors. When the city of Madison took over the delivery of service delivery for that area, they received funds from the town of Madison to do it. But once the town of that portion of the town of Madison becomes ours, those funds aren't coming to us. And what I had asked for when that happened is I asked for us to basically contract with the city of Madison so that we could already assume what our responsibility was, to get an idea of what that cost was going to be, and to share that revenue at the time. And when you're given money as a municipality, you're not all that likely to give it up, and that was the case with the city of Madison. They held on to it. They still continue to respond to those areas until the end of October.
So what I'm hearing you say is, we know this is coming. We have no plan to add headcount with this anticipated increased call volume. There's no plan in place. You're going to continue to respond with the staff you have on October 1st or on November 1st.
So yes and no. So yes, we're going to continue with what we have. We do have a plan. Whether the plan is fundable is a completely different topic, right? So we know that we need to seriously consider what's happening from an inspection standpoint. We are looking at the ability to increase command staff with this move, so that we have a person that would be responsible for code enforcement, plan review, those types of things that do impact our department as well. But from a staffing standpoint on the line level, that's going to come through referendum in one fell swoop, right? Or we do that gradually to the point where it affects our budget in a way that's sustainable. And whether that's a person a year or what, that's what I'm hoping to hear from the staffing study, how we can effectively increase our staffing numbers in a way that allows us to not necessarily negatively impact the budget.
And with due respect, I didn't mean to say the fire department has no plan. Clearly, you've shown us multiple plans, but it seems like the city doesn't really have a plan to fund additional resources around this added responsibility.
Yeah,
And
well,
that's
there's hits that keep coming too, right? I mean, the way that municipalities are funded, and income tax is one of those things, right? Where that goes to the state, that doesn't come to the municipality. And with that, because shared revenue has stayed the same, those revenues are going up. We're just not seeing it. So that shared revenue, because of how things are taxed in the state of Wisconsin, has an impact on our ability to fund our services. So the plan needs to be broad-based. It needs to be local advocacy and statewide reception.
And my last comment, in all of the timeline you showed, I think the 1970 or the initial staffing of the fire department, how many people were there? It was all volunteer, but wasn't it in the 50-ish range?
Yeah, about 40-ish.
So 1970, 40, 2022, 55. And I bet if we looked at a map of the developed part of the city of Fitchburg in 1970 versus today, wow, what a difference. To think we've only added roughly 10 or 12% to the fire department seems pretty shocking to me.
And that speaks to what we're seeing throughout the fire service, the fact that there's a number of fire departments out there that were staffed with volunteer firefighters, and still are, and fund their operation with broad sales and bake sales and gun raffles and things like that. And the municipality, and not necessarily in Fitchburg, but in other municipalities, they sort of wash their hands of funding their fire department because the fire department makes it work. I actually heard somebody say that there's an elected official that says, as long as referendums are working, the system's working. Well, okay, that forces us to take an additional step, and it creates additional heartache in our ability to provide services in a timely fashion. So I don't want this to be a political piece. I just want this to be an education piece that suggests that what we're doing right now from a funding standpoint isn't working from municipality to municipality, and that's not unique to Fitchburg. And from the state of Wisconsin fire chiefs, I can tell you that's one thing that we're working on, along with the League of Municipalities, and along with the police chiefs and EMS providers. We know that there's certain things that there's a hot topic about, and public safety is one of them. And I don't ever want to be in a position where I haven't advocated for the municipality at a level that it could be protected at the level that it needs to be.
You mentioned the citywide staffing study is coming out, and Chief, I might ask you the same question as well. What is the standard per 1,000 people in a city for the number of firefighters you have on hand on service?
So that is where the numbers get sticky, because when you have a volunteer department, those numbers look completely different than, and law enforcement is great with this. Data in law enforcement is something that we really need to be following more closely. But when you have career departments out there that staff career police officers, it's more of a like for like. So Chief Morales can give you those numbers like right now, as far as how many officers he needs per capita, per 1,000 served. I can't. I can give you comparables, but even my comparables are skewed because I came from a city in Milwaukee County that had 35 to 40,000 people, about the same size as Fitchburg, but it was an all-career department. I have a combination department now, serving about the same demographic, but my numbers are different because my workforce is different. So I can share what that looks like from some of our comparables, but it is skewed in the sense that there's a lot of variables. You want to share how many people you need?
Yes, there's a national standard that's 2.5 per 1,000. And I just randomly, as this conversation was being brought up, I Googled one, and Austin Police Department was requesting in a referendum to go to 2 officers per 1,000 because they're below that number for their population, and in return, they were going to spend of those officers if it would go through 35% of their time in community engagement. In an announcement, I want to talk a little bit more about this, but roughly for the police department, we should roughly be at around 64, sworn per the 32,000 that's in the city of Fitchburg as we speak, and growing.
Let me give you another comparable. So I came from the city of Oak Creek. Oak Creek is just south of Milwaukee. We almost, interesting story, as long as I'm telling stories, is the city of Fitchburg was made a city on the Oak Creek rule. Oak Creek became a city because the city of Milwaukee was annexing portions of the city or the town of Oak Creek at the time. Our forefathers went into hiding and basically changed the law at the state to become a city regardless of population. So they became a city and ultimately was able to maintain its boundaries without getting annexed any further. Fitchburg did the same thing in the 80s when annexation was happening by the city of Madison. So Oak Creek was the first, and Fitchburg was the last because Madison got that law taken off the books. But the idea is, and the thing that I wanted to share is, back when I started with Oak Creek in 1993, we had about 19,000 people in the city of Oak Creek. It too was a suburban, rural community. We had 45 firefighters, full-time career, for 19,000 people. And we served fire and EMS, right? So we did both. The idea that I'm trying to get across here is the fact that that was about 25, 30 years ago. And that gives you an idea of what we were looking at with a smaller population set. And you can see how we're working with what we have here in Fitchburg with similar demographics.
All right. Any other thoughts or questions or comments? Well, Chief Pulvermacher, thank you. It was very helpful, and I know for those who weren't here today, they have the opportunity to watch it on video. The whole city has the opportunity to watch it on Fact TV, and thanks to Fact TV for doing that.
And I know some of you have expressed interest in ride-alongs, and that invitation still exists as far as, at least spending some time at the fire station. You can ask firefighters their opinion. I like to stay away from the stations when they have folks coming in to ask questions. That way, I'm not impacting the discussion. You can hear it straight from the people who are doing it.
Sounds good. Any other questions for Chief Pulvermacher?
That was great.
right.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
And thank you for your time. This, to me, is exactly what needs to happen. Just to understand the history and some of the projections. I don't want to come across as somebody who wants more. I want to be that person who addresses the need, at least in advance of actually having to use it, so that we can plan for it appropriately. And this is all part of that process. So thank you.
All right. Well, that concludes agenda item number 6. Let's move to agenda item number 7. Any announcements? Chief Morales?
Yes, sir, I have one announcement. Didn't know what Chief Pulvermacher was going to present today, but at 7 o'clock next Wednesday, here in this room for the committee as a whole, we will be presenting on the Fitchburg Police Department, where we see it now, where we see us going in the future, and some of our crime-fighting strategies. So you might see a little bit of what Chief Pulvermacher had here. I'm probably going to doll it up a little bit better, so there'll be more bells and whistles going on. So I can one-up Chief Pulvermacher. But it'll be interesting, and I would like to encourage you all to attend.
Thank you.
7 o'clock next week.
Here, in the
Here,
chambers.
yes.
By the way, we're going to start asking for canines because the canines seem to be a people pleaser.
You can get the Dalmatian.
Yeah, a mascot,
Station
yes.
pets, right?
Well,
Has been discussed.
and to that point, for the community night out, again, thank you to all those who were part of that. I know there was a photographer there who was posting pictures on the Fitchburg Citizens Facebook page. So if you haven't seen them, it's a lot of great photography and a great example. Like Mr. Marshall said when he just stopped in randomly, it's makes you proud to be a citizen of Fitchburg. So thanks to you both for everything that you do and that you've always done, and thanks to the services and the officers and firefighters that are watching. Any other announcements for tonight? All right, sounds good. Then our last agenda item is number 8, adjournment. Any motions?
So moved. I will move that we adjourn this meeting of the Police and Fire Commission. Is that proper?
That works.
Okay.
I'll second. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.